What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode. So I really underestimated how much time it was going to take to get the Mini up and running. So I've spent multiple long nights staying out in the garage until like basically 5 in the morning working on this thing. The Mini is now almost all together. I'm waiting on one crucial part. So I figured because I'm rebuilding this engine, I want to do a little bit of research before I go ahead and start the vehicle up. So I found out that there's an oil that is called an engine break-in oil, and it's specifically designed for the initial break-in after you build your engine. So the reason why I'm purchasing this stuff is because I wanted to just be on the safe side of things. I've heard many people saying it's great. I've heard many people saying it doesn't really do anything, but I just figured for the longevity of the motor, I don't want to have to take this thing apart again. So I purchased this special oil. I can't remember the name of it. It's like Briggs or Joe Briggs or something like that. It's a 5W30 oil similar to what the Mini uses, but this is a break-in oil. So that means that when I turn the car on, it's going to work, everything's going to be fine, my heater's going to turn on, and everything should be in perfect working condition. Now, I'm going to be using this break-in oil for the first 2 oil changes. Now, after I do that, then I'll be able to switch back over to the standard oil that my car is rated for. I'll be switching this to the synthetic stuff, and I'll probably be using a Motul fluid. The transmission now has the WaveTrack LSD in it. It's a lifetime diff, which means there is no servicing required. As long as you put the proper fluid in the car, you're not gonna have any issues. So I put in Motul 75W90 fluid. If I go ahead and beat on the car a little bit more and I go to the track, I'll probably switch that stuff out for 75W140 from Motul. But I did a standard dump and pump procedure. Well, because there was no fluid inside the transmission, I was able to just go ahead and remove the fill plug and just pump in about almost 2 liters worth of fluid. I spent a lot of time working on the front end. The whole thing is basically coming together super nicely. So I have a really awesome upgraded Wagner competition intercooler. I have the rad installed. I have a paint match top part of the front clip right here. I did that all myself. I put a forged turbo blanket on here, and I did a whole bunch of other stuff inside the engine bay. So you guys can see that I have, well, still to work up this part of the intake. I need to connect this up to here, and I have an issue right now with this pipe here going from the turbocharger to the intercooler. So I've got to figure out either a new piece or cut this up to make it extend, because right now it's not exactly fitting nicely. So once I get that sorted out, I can get the car started. But the main thing that I'm waiting for is the fluid, the break-in engine oil. So I only looked into it this past weekend, and I just got around to ordering it. I purchased it from Amazon.ca and .com to see which one would come in first. So whichever one comes in, I'll use that first, do the first break-in service, and then after that, I'll follow it up with another one with that same fluid. I'll go through that entire procedure once I actually get the car up and running. But for today, I've been working on the car. I started taking apart some more stuff that had rust on it. So I have a couple horns on the front of the Mini. I have a low and a high, just like most cars would have. And on the back side of it, there was a little bit of rust. Now the brackets back here that attach to this also had some rust on it. Now I figured since I still have a little bit of time, I wanted to take care of them. So they're in the sandblaster right now, and I have some parts behind me drying. So I'll be able to put all that stuff back on there. I want to get this thing up and running so soon. Like, guys, I'm so pumped to get this thing started. It's almost there. We're right at the end of it. I have so much of the car together. Now it's just waiting on, again, another thing to come in. If I lived in the States, it would be basically a matter of a day waiting for this stuff to come in instead of multiple. But that's just how it goes. So this past weekend, I put on the brakes, I put the new hubs on the car, wheels are mounted, everything's torqued up, the whole front end is assembled. So you guys can see that I have the Wagner intercooler down here, brand new. Now it's a full intercooler, which means it comes and covers this entire section here, and it also goes underneath the rad. So it actually extends to about back here on the bottom. So it basically uses up as much space as possible on the front end of the car. I have the rad in, I have the bumper, the crash bar in. So there's that piece I was talking about that was paint matched. I did that myself. I eventually probably will paint up the wide body fenders. I'll probably paint match them to the same pepper white, and then should I decide to wrap the car, I'll do that. But you know, this paint match does look really good. Matches the Mini pretty nicely. It's the same pepper white color. But as you guys can see, I've got the turbo mounted. I have the entire cooling system mounted. Here's the intercooler pipe that I was talking about. I purchased, this here was that main piece that I was talking about before that I was waiting on last time. So this is the intake pipe that fits over top of this turbo. So because my turbocharger has a larger inlet, because the compressor wheel is larger, I needed a new pipe here that was a larger diameter. So now that it fits over top of this little flanger here, that goes on top. Now my next concern is figuring out this here. So I need to connect this up to this. I'll probably just get like a larger piece of metal here to connect the two, clamp it on, and then call it a day. The initial startup for me right now is going to be my main concern. Now, when I go ahead to initially start the car, I'm not going to have any spark plugs in there so that there is no compression that's being built up. I first want to put the engine break-in oil inside the engine, get the car started, which means basically just turning the crankshaft, which means the oil pump will turn and everything is going to get lubricated. I want to try and have it so there's the least amount of stress on this engine as possible for that first initial turn. So right now there's no spark plugs in there. I'm going to take these off just so that, well, there's nothing in the way, but I want to have it so that this thing can turn super easily. So once that gets rotating, once the oil gets lubricated around the entire engine along with the turbo, only at that point will I go ahead and put the spark plugs back in there and physically go ahead to turn the car on properly. So we're hoping that everything goes smoothly. If I wasn't so picky and didn't have to remove all the rust on every single bolt on this car, I don't think this would have taken anywhere near as long. But as you guys can tell, I didn't exactly just do a build. I did a full restoration with this Mini, along with building everything up to make it better. So thank you guys for the patience. If you guys want to stay tuned to see what's going on with the Mini, I'm going to be having the startup video, like a quick hint or whatever, on Instagram. So if you guys aren't following me, definitely do it so you guys are going to be able to see the first startup for this car. As soon as I get that oil, this baby is getting turned on. I am so pumped. Make sure you guys follow me on Instagram so you guys can see exactly when this thing goes on and starts for the first time in 2 years. The exhaust system for the Mini currently stops right here. So right underneath the engine, you can see that the downpipe is right there and it's wrapped in a titanium wrap and it stops right there. I am going to have to install the exhaust system on this because I probably won't be able to hear anything that's actually going on with the engine if there's anything faulty the way it is. So I'm going to install my exhaust system, get that hooked up, and then hopefully when this thing starts, I'll be able to hear if there's any issues. Now, knock on wood, there isn't, but you know, in the event that there is, I'll be able to hear it. So because I still have a little bit of time before I can physically turn over the engine and get it started, I figured I might as well do some more preventative maintenance. So right here inside this kit, this is a fuel filter replacement kit. So it's the fuel filter along with all the extra seals that you'll need when you want to replace your fuel filter. So because my car has 120,000 kilometers on the odometer, I figured it'd be a good time to do that now. So I have all of these parts here along with a special tool so that I can remove the ring that's found in the back of the car. So you're gonna need both of these. You're gonna need a 10 mil, you're gonna need some screwdrivers, and this should, in theory, be a pretty relatively easy install. So I'm gonna go inside the car and get started with that. Alrighty, so in your car, you're gonna have two of these little covers, one of them found on the driver's side, and this one here found on the passenger side. So using a 10 millimeter socket, you're gonna wanna remove each one of these 5 nuts that are securing this plate onto the car. Instead of tightening it, you're gonna wanna loosen it. Next up, you're gonna either wanna use a flathead screwdriver or a plastic interior trim tool so that you can remove this cover safely without scratching this and the actual body of the car. With the cover off, you can see how disgusting what was underneath the cover is. So the underside of this is all exposed to the elements underneath. So you can see that because my car was winter driven, you can see there's some rust around there. So I'm gonna first clean this up before I remove this cover so that I don't introduce any of this dirt into the fuel system. Next up comes removing the little connector here that brings the fuel from the fuel tank to the front of the car. So this fuel line here needs to be pinched off, and you can see there's a little arrow on the top of it that is leading out. So once you pinch it in and squeeze it, you'll be able to remove the connector and pull it out. It might help if you have a flathead like this where you can push in both sides of the connector and then pry it forward. Now be careful, if it doesn't want to come out, don't force it. You want to push in on both tabs to allow it to come out. Try wiggling it too to see if that makes any difference. Now if I were you guys, I would put a little bit of lubricant on this nozzle here so that if you have any dirt or whatever that's on this connector, it should slide out nice and easily. Now with this screwdriver, I'm going to put a little mark on this ring, and I'm going to know that it's going to be able to indicate down so that when I remove this and then put it back on, I know exactly how tight to tighten it to. So next up, you're going to need this special fuel filter tool that you use a 1/2 inch wrench for. and then it connects onto this little ring. It should slide over top of each one of these like little grooves on here, and then you should be able to remove the filter and this cap. Now I have seen people remove this with a hammer, but I wouldn't suggest that, because if you damage these teeth, you won't be able to open this up. So with using that special tool, you can see it came off super easy. Now before I put this back in, I'm going to clean this up and sandblast it, because as you guys can tell, it's definitely seen better days. But next up comes removing this little cage right here that has the filter inside of it. Now unfortunately there isn't a fancy tool to remove this, but a trusty flathead will do the trick. So you slide this over top of here, where the little arrow is and the connector goes into, and you just slightly pry it up gently, and then just work your way around it until you actually create enough leverage to lift it up and out. You can physically hear the seal coming off. So just like that, we didn't damage anything, and we can lift this up. Now inside of this cage here is going to be a couple O-rings that we're going to replace, along with the filter. Now the filter is the main part that we're going to change. So next up, we're going to have to lift the entire thing out, but do not completely remove it, because you have the sending unit that's found underneath of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to separate the O-ring here from the top, and you can see that there's two different parts here. So this top part here is one piece, and this is another. So the easy way to remove this is stick a flathead screwdriver through the bottom part of the little port up here. So not in this, but down here, and just get this so that you can spin it a little bit. Once you break it loose, you should be able to crack this open and get access to the insides. So once you turn it until it can't turn anymore, you're then going to go ahead and pry this up. There's definitely still gasoline that's inside of there, so just take your time with this. Have a rag, because you're definitely going to need it once you break this off. Can you guys hear that? So currently I can hear the fuel drain out of the filter, kind of like an oil filter. So like that, you can see that there is one little O-ring on the inside of there. We're going to need to replace that in a minute. Here is our dirty filter. Oh man, yeah, this has definitely seen better days. And you remove this just like an oil cartridge that you would replace for your oil change. So you can see how this is really brown and disgusting. This is after 120,000 kilometers of use. Now honestly, I was expecting this to be a little bit worse, but it's actually not too bad. And from the looks of it, it doesn't seem like there's an orientation as to which way the fuel filter goes in, whether it be this way or this way. So I'm going to put that aside. There's another O-ring here, right there. Now that there's like a little lip on the inside of here. That's where this here would go. So this is a very small O-ring. We're going to put that over there. And if I'm not mistaken, there's going to be another one down on the bottom, another small one. So I'm first going to evacuate this fuel, and then we're going to go ahead and reinstall all the new components on here and on here. Now, using the same tool that I used to bleed my brakes, I'm going to stick this down into the fuel cartridge down here and try to remove as much fuel as I can. You can see that emptied it out rather quickly. With all that fuel now removed, we'll be able to get access to that little O-ring that's found inside of here. So can you see down there the little O-ring on the bottom of that little nipple? So I'm going to be using a little hook tool to remove it and then insert a new one back onto that. So in this kit, it's going to come with, obviously, the new filter. You're going to get 2 new seals. Now you're only going to need one of them. So if you're planning on opening up one side, you're going to need one. If you want to replace the fuel pump as well, you're going to need the other. But for today, we're only opening up this side to change the filter. So we're going to need one of these. We're going to need that. We're going to need the large O-ring here. And we're also going to need the 2 small ones that are also included in this kit that are meant for the tops and bottoms of the sealing kit down here. So there's going to be one on the bottom and another one on the actual top part that we removed. So we're going to set both of these aside, and we're going to get started with removing the little one that's found down here. So using a little angled pick tool, you just try and like grab it up. Now if you break this one, it's not the end of the world because we do have a new one going in, but try not to damage the actual housing when you're doing this. So as you guys can see, that's the O-ring. So we're gonna put that aside. Now before you put this new one on, ideally, if you can let this soak in a little bit of fuel to allow it to like lubricate and go on easier, you're not necessarily going to be stretching this. So just push this down. Try and hold up the actual assembly in here to make it easier, and you just slide it down until it doesn't want to go anymore. So there's that. Now we can let that sit there while we change out the other ones. So just like the other, you're gonna slide up onto the O-ring, slide it around, there you go. Grab the new one, put a little bit of fuel on it, and slide it over top. So this isn't exactly a complicated install, but it is a somewhat delicate install per se. So ideally when you're doing this, you want to try and stay as clean as possible. So you don't want to ruin anything, you don't want to damage anything, you don't want to get any dirt in there, because if you run dirt through the fuel pump, you can actually not only damage the pump, but also your engine. So try and stay as clean as possible whenever you're doing this procedure. After that seal, the next part is installing the larger one. So this seal here basically makes a seal in between this top piece and the lower part down here. So there's two ways you can install this. You can either install it on the bottom, or you can go ahead and grab the top part and slide it around the top like so. And this here essentially ensures that you get a good seal between the two. So it goes on there like that. So once you push it up all the way, just like that, go around, make sure it's completely seated. This here is now done. Next up comes installing the large ring here. So we haven't removed this yet, but it's actually down in there. So it might not be blue, it might be a different color. On my car, from the looks of it, it looks like it's orange. Now it seems to be kind of stuck down there, so I'm actually gonna cut it off. But you're just trying to make sure that you put the new seal back on there in the same orientation that you removed it. So like that. So you can see that when you install the new piece, you want to put it on the same way. So make sure that you put it on not like this, but the little lip on top of the seal is facing up. So this new seal here with the little lip goes face up like so. So it goes around the outside perimeter of the top cap like that. So next up, we can install the new filter. So as I mentioned earlier, there is no up or down orientation. The fuel filter works in both directions. So you're just gonna grab the new filter and you're gonna push it down into place. Now, what you're essentially trying to do is fight that O-ring. So if you put a little bit of fuel on there, it will make it a little bit easier when you install this. So if you can, bring it up like this and just push down. Like that. So after you push that into place, you can grab this guy here. Now if you have a little bit of fuel on this, it'll make it a little bit easier for the install. Now just keep note of the orientation from before. So remember how this was somewhat in that direction? So you're gonna wanna line these up so they're all facing the same way. Push this so it seats into place. And then once it's seated, you're gonna wanna rotate this clockwise until it locks into place and it's fully seated. So you can then lower this down. That then will sit like this, and then we can go ahead and reinstall that little cap that goes over top to lock this down. Now I'm going to sandblast mine, but that pretty much completes this install. So once you replace all the seals, you tighten this up, and be sure that you not only don't forget to reinstall this little connector here so that the fuel can go to the engine, but you're gonna have to go ahead and prime the fuel system a couple times before you go ahead and turn the vehicle on. Because right now there is no fuel inside the filter. So what you'd essentially do is put the car in key on, engine off, turn it off completely, repeat to key on, engine off, so the fuel pump will prime the fuel filter, and then from there you can go ahead and turn on the car. I would prime it at least 5 times before you go ahead and turn the vehicle on, just so that everything is lubricated and everything is supposed to work as it should. So I'm gonna go ahead and clean up this ring here, throw it in my sandblaster, paint it up, and basically make it so it doesn't look so nasty. So I'm gonna clean this and fix that. But if you guys have any further questions regarding the video, comment section's down there. I'm gonna be having the Mini up and running super soon. If you guys aren't following me on Instagram, definitely do, because that's where I'll be announcing when I'll be turning the engine on. Knock on wood, it's going to be super soon, but if you guys can be a part of it and you guys can be there for when I start it on, it's gonna be awesome. I promise you guys. I'm waiting right now for parts to come in. This time it's engine oil, but I wanna have the Mini up and running super soon. If you guys have any further questions, comment section's down there. You know what to do. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.